We would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the land on which the university stands. We respectfully recognize elders past, present, and future. Welcome to Newsline.
Brought to you live from the Media Precinct in RMIT Melbourne.
Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm Ethan Benedicto.
And I'm Zoe de Koning.
Today on the program, we'll hear about umpire abuse in local sport, the micro dining craze taking over Melbourne, and the regional town coming together to save a tree.
We'll also have updates across sports, international affairs and weather. But first to today's headlines. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese will deliver the Witcher O'Donoghue oration in Adelaide later today. Albanese will use the address to honour Miss O'Donoghue and renew his appeal for a successful Aboriginal voice to Parliament. The speech follows his plea last Thursday for Australians to do one better than the 1967 referendum and vote yes when they go to the polls later this year.
Australian rent affordability is at an all-time low, with a new report showing the average household spends a third of its income on rent. Sydney still has the least affordable housing market, where it could take more than 12 years to save a 20% deposit. While some costs is traced back to the COVID-19 pandemic, researchers from Ahuri also said housing developments are no longer profitable.
2 victims have been identified following a crash that killed 4 people in Melbourne's west on Saturday morning. Loved ones have paid tribute to 31-year-old Alicia Montebello and 17-year-old Joshua Elms after their Toyota sedan left the road at high speed and struck a tree in Bocara. A 17-year-old sole survivor remains in critical condition.
Authorities in Western Australia have issued a fire warning for outback drivers after a 4-wheel drive erupted into flames at the weekend. Dry grass and spinifex trapped in the vehicle's underbelly are alleged to have caused the fire. An editor of 4x4 magazine, Matt Rudonokis, told the ABC these kinds of fires are rare, but other local communities have reported similar fires through the wet season as vegetation increases.
Space agency iSpace say a software glitch caused Japan's failed moon landing in March when the spacecraft Hakuto R ran out of fuel. The agency was forced to destroy the rocket after the attempted launch, which was meant to be the first commercial soft landing. A second mission is set to go ahead in 2024.
Now to our first story. Football is an important part of Australian life, and local games bring communities together each and every week. But abuse directed at local umpires could be changing the spirit of the game. Tez McCracken has the story.
Joseph McMahon has been part of the football community since he was 5 and spent 2 years umpiring his local footy league. His love of the game and what he describes as a great way to get out there and have fun is what kept him involved in umpiring for so many years. But there is a downside to the job that all too many local umpires have experienced: the abuse from spectators. Australia has watched it play out at an elite level in the AFL, but it's just as present in community leagues. Just this month, the Heathcote Football Netball Club was handed a $2,000 fine and suspended until the end of the season for its fans' abuse towards umpires. It's something Joseph is all too familiar with.
Intimidation, like blokes who are much bigger and older than you just coming up and just trying to scare you. Verbal abuse, like stuff to the extent of yellow maggot.
A West Australian Football Commission report has found that 8 in 10 local football umpires experienced verbal abuse during the 2022 football season. 50% of that abuse was from spectating parents. Doug Horworth, head of umpiring the South Metro Junior Football League, says that while this is an issue local leagues are seeing, appropriate measures are being put in place to combat this.
What we have to deal with from our end is when we see bad behaviour, we just need to work on matter of fact, what happened, and then how can we support the umpire and what can we do to resolve that and then make sure it doesn't happen again.
But for Joey, Doug and others alike, this hasn't changed their love for the sport or the job. Tess McCracken reporting for RMIT Newsline.
We're heading to a short break now. Coming up, James Dowling explores Melbourne's micro fine dining scene. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. Opening a restaurant is an expensive undertaking, so appraising business owners are finding new strategies to make their restaurant dreams come true. James Dowling has more.
Melbourne is known for its exploratory approach to fine dining, but rising property prices, cost of goods, and job insecurity are making it harder for low-income workers to afford their own businesses. With this shift, many first-time restaurateurs are seeing that the biggest new move is going small. By lowering the seating of their venues, these chefs and creators are beating out the exclusivity of major restaurants and making the expression of their palate possible on a budget.
If it's a high cover venue, you would assume that you want it in a peak location, potentially the city. So that's going to be expensive rent-wise, and you're fitting that out. And then you need a huge amount of staff. And usually when you're opening a venue for the first time, you have extra staff, more staff than what you need. So you've got to pay for training. Yeah, there's a lot of stresses to opening a big venue, but there's also a lot of stresses to opening a small venue as well.
Many of Melbourne's top venues came during the era of celebrity chef restaurateurs, a period that has become less relevant as social media gives customers exposure to so many more chefs and food voices. However, these smaller and more affordable venues can run on the budget of their caretakers, still with the focus on provenance and seasonality that makes a venue luxurious.
Things are getting a lot more expensive, and there's less room for error. And obviously, if you're new to this and you're not like a large company, it's a lot easier to make mistakes and things are a lot more expensive. Yeah. So it is shrinking.
By analysing the latest Good Food Guide, you can see that only 40% of the most acclaimed restaurants in Melbourne and the inner suburbs are independently owned, with those venues also holding 40% of the total awards. Bavaria and Greasy Zoe's are both relatively new venues, but have remained largely immune to this shift in ownership. While their size limits their profit and raises cost of goods, it allows them to run at a more manageable scale and keep their focus on expressive menus. James Dowling for Newsline.
And now Ruby Littler joins us for international news.
Recep Tayyip Erdogan secured his third term as Turkish president in Sunday's runoff election. Erdogan received 52% of the vote, narrowly beating out opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. The opposition claims Erdogan's amassing of power continues to undermine democracy. Justine Triet became the third female director to win Cannes Film Festival's most prestigious award, the Palme d'Or, on Saturday. Anatomy of the Fall follows a writer trying to prove her innocence after her husband's death. Triet used her speech to criticise French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Moving to India, a government official has been suspended for draining the Karakoram Dam to retrieve the phone he dropped while taking a selfie. Over 2 million litres of water were pumped out of the reservoir, only to find the phone was waterlogged and unusable. The move sparked wide criticism as India is among the most water-stressed countries in the world. To Italy, one person has been pronounced dead and several missing after a tourist boat capsized at Lake Maggiore. Strong winds and heavy storms caused the boat to overturn, endangering more than 20 tourists and crew members. The nationality of those aboard is yet to be released, as authorities continue to search for the missing people. Over to America, US politicians have reached a tentative deal just days before the country was set to hit the debt ceiling. President Joe Biden called the agreement a compromise, capping federal spending and tightening welfare rules. While the major parties' senior representatives have agreed on a resolution, the deal has still yet to be passed through Congress before becoming signed by law.
So, Ruby, what is a debt ceiling?
Yeah, so the debt ceiling is the maximum amount of money that the government can borrow, and it's kind of like the equivalent of a home loan for you and I per se. So the bank's going to assess your previous debts, whether or not you took money out on a car, whether or not you took money out on a business maybe, before they think you're a viable investment to lend money to. So it works similar, but instead of a bank, it's Congress lending out money to the US.
And how much debt are we actually talking about?
Yeah, so they're actually in debt of $31 trillion. So that's triple the amount since 2009. And that's quite a big number. So to contextualise that more person to person, it's the equivalent of $94,000 per American citizen. Now, the administrations have been running at deficits for about 20 years now, so it's not necessarily unheard of, it's just that it's amounted to this much at this stage.
So what happens if the government can't borrow any more money?
Yeah, so the government's money, they need to pay their bills like anyone. They need to pay welfare, they need to pay the military, and they need to pay pensioners. So if the deal doesn't go through, they're projecting, think tank Moody and investment supervisors are projecting a halt of 1/10 of the US economy, and potentially 2 million jobs could be at stake. And this will obviously cause a lot of flow-on effects to the global economy given the substantial size of the US market.
There's doubt this deal will go through. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so due to the hyper-partisan nature of American politics at the moment, the Republicans, there's a large group of Republicans who really want to strap in the spending of the government more so. And there still needs to pass through the lower house of reps. And since Trump's administration, there are still a few representatives, and they're going to be advocating pretty strongly to have even tighter reforms before they agree to let this pass. And there needs to be concrete bipartisan support on this deal.
We will be watching this story closely for updates across the next week. Thank you, Ruby. New Zealanders hoping to become Australian citizens now have an easier time making the move after new laws came into effect last month. The changes are the most significant in 22 years, but Kiwis can finally breathe a sigh of relief. Matt Slocum reports.
On the 22nd of April, the Australian government announced a direct pathway to Australian citizenship for Kiwis living in Australia. It will have an immediate impact on the nearly 500,000 Kiwis who now reside here, allowing them to transition between countries easier and permanently call Australia home. This decision is being lauded as the biggest improvement to New Zealander lives in Australia. It restores the rights that Kiwis used to have before 2001, before there was a rule change.
The vast majority of New Zealanders that move here, they having access to these services will mean that they don't depart the moment there's a difficulty, and that means that we get to keep them for longer and hopefully forever. So it's really good.
The changes will be effective from July 1st, around 5 weeks from now. To be eligible, you still have to meet the Australian citizenship requirements and live in the country for 4 years. So it's not an instant change, but the benefits for those that are eligible right now are life-changing.
Back in 2012, when I started in this field, it was crazy what a New Zealander had to do to be able to get permanent residency, even if they were eligible.
However, some miss out, and Ben is one of those people. He moved back to New Zealand in March, just a year before he was eligible for citizenship, due to financial reasons. However, his head has been turned by the news, and he's considering moving back due to the enormous benefits and the opportunity for dual citizenship.
100%, I would say it's super tempting. Obviously, when we were there, you did have to obviously wait a certain number of years before you could be considered.
It makes Kiwis feel more secure in Australia. They're already paying tax and contribute enormously to society here, and for many, it's where they raise their children. It's a change that's long overdue. It will have an immediate impact on hundreds of thousands of people, and for Kiwis calling Australia home, life just got a whole lot easier. Matt Slocum, RMIT Newsline.
The cheap price tag of cask wine has made it a popular drink for decades, but a new study has found drastic changes in the way Australians are consuming the beverage. We go live to reporter Declan Bailey with more. What can you tell us, Declan?
A study has found that sales of cask wine, commonly found in its iconic silver pouch, have dropped while sales of bottled wine continue to grow. Research conducted by the Centre for Alcohol Policy Research at La Trobe University found that over the decade from 2010 to 2019, sales of cask wine dropped by more than 5% across all age groups.
So, Declan, what is the cause for this drop?
Yeah, so researchers feel that the major cause for this drop is due to the stigma around cask wine consumption. Even the over 65 age group, who very well may have been drinking cask wine at the height of its popularity in the 70s and 80s, they saw a decline in consumption as well, although a far less dramatic one than the other age groups.
So what did the research show about the ways people drink cask wine?
Yeah, so the survey showed that those who drink cask wine averaged around 6.5 standard drinks per day, which is roughly double the amount of drinks consumed by moderate and high cost bottled wine drinkers. It also found that cask wine drinkers were largely overrepresented amongst Australia's heaviest drinkers. They were found to be twice as likely to be in the top 10% of drinkers. And cask wine is also shown to be the cheapest of the wines, which separate research shows is likely a selling point.
So is this drop part of a larger decline in alcohol consumption as a whole?
Yeah, research conducted by the ABS showed that alcohol consumption has decreased across all age groups in the past decade, with youth consumption falling in particular.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about young people and their consumption of cask wine.
Yeah, so again, while the drop was seen across all age groups, the decline was sharpest in that 16 to 24 age range, where it dropped around 8%. This is in line with broader youth drinking trends, with younger people increasingly abstaining from drinking, and those who choose to drink choosing to consume far less than previous. ABS data shows that the number of 18 to 24-year-olds abstaining from alcohol rose by 8% from 2009 to 2019. And researchers in this study noted that the fall in youth cask wine consumption may also be due to them not designating it as their main drink of choice and choosing to drink other drinks when they consume alcohol.
Thanks, Declan. We're heading to a break now. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Newsline. I'm Zoe de Koning. St Kilda is a popular spot for Melbourne creatives, but new developments and noise limits are making it difficult for musicians and venues alike. Ruby Littler reports.
St Kilda has been a beachfront hub of live music, art and community for decades. But as residential developments continue to emerge on main strips, musicians are having to turn the volume down. Owner of the Vineyard, Johnny Iodise says venues are often blocked by permits when they want to host gigs after dark.
Music, food, places where people congregate shape our society. What's been happening is that people love lifestyle nodes. They love living above them. However, they can't handle the noise.
These standards relating to noise limitations could soon change. The City of Port Phillip Council are developing a live action music plan with aims to support musicians and venues. Community contributions to the plan will close in July and then be passed on for Victorian Government approval. Susie Cupidole, former president of St Kilda Live and Vic Live, says the music industry's value is being overlooked.
But if there's tramworks in the middle of the night, that's okay. If there's an AFL football ground, that's also okay. But if a venue has got live music before 11 p.m, they can still be threatened by their neighbours.
The ultimate goal is to establish an entertainment precinct.
An entertainment precinct would allow the live music industry to thrive without impeding too much noise on local residents.
This includes people insulating properties better in new developments.
And the noise decibel limit will be raised by the local council.
Operating like shopping and sports precincts, the iconic nightlife strips of Melbourne would have different noise regulations.
This isn't a residential precinct, this is an entertainment precinct, highlighting and victimising venues. It's culturally going to destroy what is the arts capital of not only Melbourne but Australia.
The noise complaints will be an ongoing consideration in this plan's development, trying to merge people's love of the city lifestyle while respecting normal waking hours. This has been Ruby Littler reporting for Newsline.
Now reporter Chloe Nash brings us a story on the changing landscape of thrift stores in the social media age.
Generations, helping people have access to cheaper and sustainable clothing. However, recent online trends are causing people to find other stores to shop from.
I used to all the time, almost religiously, but over the last 5 years I stopped because unfortunately it became cheaper to get fast fashion from Kmart and all of those places than actually go to a thrift store. It's quite disconcerting when you go into a thrift store, and even if it's okay quality, it's twice the amount, of a brand new item.
Seen as a sustainable way to shop, fast fashion has had a negative impact on the shelves of thrift stores. With racks filled with trendy brands made from poor materials, people are turning to buy from smaller brands and businesses to ensure their clothing passes a quality check. Another big threat that is clearing out thrift stores are resellers. These shoppers use opportunity stores to find big-name brands at a cheap price, where they resell these items for a profit later on.
Because they've become quite popular, fashionable, people tend to use it as a fashion statement rather than actually going there because you want a cheaper option.
Especially when you're looking on TikTok and stuff, a lot of people are going thrifting.
There's a niche, that's for sure, but most of the time I don't really buy from vintage resellers and all that. I just buy from local op shops.
Although it can be seen as a positive thing that thrift stores are becoming widely accepted, it is important to use these shops for the right reasons so that they can continue to be an option for those who need it. Chloe Nash, RMIT Newsline.
Staying on arts and culture, Ben Estelle joins us live from the Loom at Melbourne Convention Centre and has the scoop on the new installation arriving next month. Ben, tell us what's going on.
The Loom is moving on from its Monet and Friends exhibition with a new program next month titled Connection. This will be the Loom's most significant experience yet, with the most comprehensive telling of our country's story through multiple mediums and combining First Nations culture with cutting-edge tech.
So, Ben, what's this Connection program all about?
So, Connection opens on June 23rd with 550 digital and original artworks from more than 110 artists. Monet and Friends, focusing on French Impressionists, will be leaving the Loom on June 4th.
Sounds exciting. When can people expect to visit the new exhibit?
So, it opens on June 23rd, and again, this will be a incredibly large coalition of Indigenous artists' work being displayed in the famous Loom.
So the Loom is known for some pretty spectacular exhibitions, right, Ben?
Yes. So previous Loom exhibitions included Van Gogh Alive, which showcased the Dutch painter's eclectic use of colour and form. Since the Loom opened in November 2021, more than 850,000 people have attended the exhibition, and more than 8,000 people attended 39 events.
What about those who don't want to miss out on Monet and Friends?
So Monet and Friends will still be available at the Loom until June 4th. You can still buy tickets right now.
Thanks for that, Ben. We'll be sure to check out the new exhibit Connection. We're going for a short break now, and we'll be back soon with the Roundup.
Welcome to the Roundup. I'm Freddie Moffat.
And I'm Phoebe Miller. In the Roundup, we're going to be looking at some of the biggest stories across arts, tech, and political cartoons. But first, let's check out what's making news around the world.
The New York Times is covering the agreement to raise the United States debt ceiling. The deal ends a months-long stalemate between parties that risked the government entering default on loans worth trillions of dollars. However, the deal results in funding cuts to programs for low-income households. The Times is also discussing the parallels between our lives and the fictional lives of the ultra-rich Roy family in the television series Succession, which concludes its final season today.
Across the North Pacific, the Japan Times is reporting on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework meeting and the agreement to strengthen supply chain resilience for items such as semiconductors and medicines. The agreement calls for countries to form a crisis response network to warn the 14 partner IPEF countries about the supply disruptions in order to coordinate responses. The paper also covers the suspect bear attacks in Hokkaido and the rising concerns amongst officials on the management of the growing population of brown bears, which has reached 12,000.
Shifting to Indonesia, the Jakarta Post is reporting on the government's new judicial reform team as investigations continue into Supreme Court bribery. The team will be in charge of closing loopholes in the judicial structure and criminal justice system to prevent corruption. 2 Supreme Court justices were arrested last year for allegedly taking bribes. The Post is also looking at the proposed futuristic city of Nusantara, promised to power buildings entirely with renewables, with citizens getting around in flying cars, but now questions are being raised on how realistic those visions really are.
Moving west, the Malta Independent is featuring the recent Moving west, the Malta Independent is featuring the recent audit office report on the controversial healthcare scandal. Former Prime Minister Joseph Muscat granted management of 3 hospitals to the inexperienced Vital Healthcare Group. 5 years later, this was transferred to US-based Stewart Healthcare, which agreed with the court's decision to turn the hospitals to state control. NOA report owned the transfer under former Prime Minister Konrad Mizki.
Over to Israel, the Jerusalem Post is covering debates over Zionism's influence over government decisions. A government proposal to boost Jewish values in the nation has been met with concerns over discrimination. The Attorney General is attempting to block the proposal, saying the government can't decide that one value is superior to the others, while supporters are exploring options for passing these policies without Attorney General support. Discussions on the matter continue.
And finally, the Times of India is reporting on the 35 deaths in Manipur yesterday as ethnic tensions raise. Violence began on May 3rd over economic policies in the region, with at least 60 people killed and 35,000 being displaced since the conflict began. The paper says houses have been torched and innocent civilians have been attacked. The Times paper also covered the rain delay The paper says houses have been torched and innocent civilians have been attacked. The Times also covers the rain delay impacting the Indian Premier League. This is the first time the soccer tournament will be played on the Monday, where the Gujarat Titans will compete against the Chennai Kings.
And that's all for today's Front Page World News.
To tech news now, a team of space scientists have found that the plasma bubble created from the Hunga Tonga Hunga Haipai volcanic eruption in January last year have disrupted precise technology for hours. This disruption reached as far as Townsville, affecting agriculture, construction and mining technology. We're joined by tech reporter Jade Canizo. Jada, superplastic bubbles form after volcanic eruptions. What exactly are they, and how does a superplasma bubble disrupt GPS technology?
Yeah, so plasma bubbles are similar to what happens when a heavy fluid sits on top of a less heavy fluid, kind of like when you pour milk into a cup of tea. Last year, there was a volcanic eruption in Tonga. Scientists led by RMIT University professor Brett Carter found that the eruption was so powerful it created a superplasma bubble, which actually disrupted precise GPS connections for hours, affecting construction, mining and agriculture. This was one of the largest explosions in modern history and actually impacted GPS signals across Australia and Southeast Asia, which was felt as far south as Townsville.
So we know about a month ago a satellite went down that caused GPS connection to fail. If these tech issues were to continue to happen, what would that mean for the Australian agricultural industry?
Yeah, exactly right. So about a month ago, a satellite went down that caused the GPS connection to fail. This affected the agriculture industry as most modern tractors rely on GPS for automatic steering, which left Australian farmers in the lurch. Because phone coverage is patchy in regional areas, this is a huge issue. Michael Casey, the General Manager of an agriculture cooperative in New South Wales, says that he and his team are pushing for customers to add cellular connectivity to the machines, which would mean having a mobile phone directly connected to the tractor. The solution seems like a simple one, but it is limited by Australia's poor network coverage. New South Wales Farmers Association said the reliance on technology has brought efficiency, but it also has made the industry vulnerable.
In other news, Twitter is the only platform that has pulled out of the European Union's code to fight disinformation. Dozens of other tech firms have signed on to the EU's disinformation code. Why is Elon Musk's Twitter refusing?
So we know that many tech companies big and small, like Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Google, Microsoft and Twitch have all committed to the EU's disinformation code. Before Elon Musk took over Twitter last year, he actually spoke to the EU Market Commissioner, Terry Breton, and Musk actually agreed with the EU's disinformation code. Take a look at that here.
I think just anything that my companies can do that would be beneficial to Europe, we want to do that.
However, after taking over Twitter, moderation of disinformation has been greatly reduced, with Musk himself laying off specialists in that area.
So late on Friday, the EU Commissioner Terry Breton has made some comments about this issue. What did he have to say in response to Twitter withdrawing from the disinformation code?
Yeah, so Breton said on his Twitter account late on Friday that Twitter leaves the EU voluntary code of practice against disinformation. He goes on to say their obligations remain. You can run, but you can't hide. Breton also said that beyond voluntary commitments, fighting disinformation will become a legal obligation as of August 25th under the EU Digital Services Act. Twitter will qualify as a very large online platform, requiring the company to address harmful content and submit annual risk assessments to the Commission.
And that's all for Tech News today. Thanks for joining us, Jada.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the political satire segment now with reporter Jade Egan. Jade, the first cartoon you've brought in for us today is about the PricewaterhouseCoopers scandal. How have cartoonists been taking this one on?
Hi Freddie and hello Phoebe. So cartoonist Joe Bank is painting a pretty clear picture here of PwC's ex-CEO Luke Sayers running away from his problems. He's just packing up and he's leaving them behind. So let me tell you, for those who aren't aware of what we're talking about, these are really, really big problems. We have an ethical and a moral disaster on our hands here. And often political and financial jargon can be missed when we're discussing topics of this nature. So he's being questioned as the events took place under his watch. He's thinking, what a time to head on vacation and turn a blind eye. Quite convenient. But what we're dealing with here are allegations of corruption and a misuse of funds at PwC. Public money was allegedly misused, distributed between high-profile employees at PwC Australia and also across the globe. Unethical collaboration was designed to profit those who manipulated the system and took advantage of their power.
Okay, so one of the key players here is the former head of international tax at PwC. His name is Peter Collins. What do we know about Peters and what responsibility he has in the scandal?
So Peter Collins signed 3 confidentiality agreements with the Australian government between the years 2013 and 2018. He had access to highly confidential information about the Australian tax laws, which were designed to ensure a fair share of tax was distributed. But there's a significant public outrage now, with the demanding of accountability and names to be listed. But what we do know for sure is that many major international companies avoided paying their fair share of tax. So people are questioning, where else did this happen? And people are going to take a closer look and investigate if it did happen within the 4 big firms.
Now, onto our next cartoon. This one is looking at the long-running abortion debate in the United States. There have been some developments in South Carolina. Can you talk us through the next story?
Absolutely. So Anne Talnase is really just telling the whole story in a simple and really insightful way. There's a lot of impact, but sometimes we know less can be more.
So let's unpack it a little bit here, Jade. We know that there are currently no women on the South Carolina State Supreme Court bench, and physicians who violate the law will have their licenses revoked. So what's happening on the ban on abortion?
Well, the latest news is that a judge has temporarily frozen the state's recent abortion restrictions from going ahead, one day after Henry McMaster signed the law. Now, the Senate had voted to ban abortions after as early as 6 weeks into a woman's pregnancy. Republican Senator Tom Davis stated, "At some point in time, the right of the state to see the unborn child born does take precedent over the woman's right to her body." Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this has created serious uproar amongst the public, and they're contesting it. So a lawsuit in the state court was filed against it immediately after the law went into effect. Here's one Republican speaking against the abortion ban.
Women really don't know. They just don't know, in most cases, that they're even pregnant. And that seems to be a sticking point for a lot of people.
Richland County, South Carolina, put the law on hold until it can be reviewed by the state Supreme Court. Now, this will determine whether or not it violates the state's constitution. But what people really want to talk about, as we've seen in the content right across the web, is why do the state believe that they have entitlement to ownership over a woman's body? We'll be taking a closer look at this dialogue over the next few days.
And onto our final cartoon. This one dives into the UK politics and some of the problems haunting the British Prime Minister.
So let's head over to the UK, where cartoonist Chris Riddell has portrayed an illustration of British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in bed with all of his demons. Now, the key themes here are power, or limitations of power, and the 5 pledges. Now, we know that people have been questioning his authority ever since his big performance in January, promising a whole lot of good to the British public.
So there's been some skepticism about Sunak's belief that he can halve inflation, especially considering the caps he's using were last implemented 50 years ago. So has Sunak been warned about the potential problems?
Well, we need to look at this a little bit more broadly. So Sunak has been warned that his plan for a 1970s style price cap will lead to food shortages and amid a backlash from cabinet ministers and supermarkets as well. One cabinet minister stated that the last time price caps were used was around 50 years ago, so it just simply wouldn't work in this day and age. Other warnings include a potential recession forecasted for 2024 in the UK, as stubbornly high inflation pushes interest rates to more than 5% before the next general election. Now, it's blatantly obvious that this just is not a good look for him, to be ignoring predictions. Hence, Riddell's illustration of the Prime Minister fast asleep in bed and not addressing fundamental issues within the British economy.
Thanks, Jade, for the look at the political cartoons. To Arts News now, Sydney's Vivid Festival just kicked off last Friday. We're joined now by arts reporter Oliver Wynne. Ollie, Vivid Festival's spectacular lighting displays have been showing every year since its debut in 2009. Is there anything new this year that people can expect to see?
Yeah, so the festival has been running for about 14 years now. This year it plans to incorporate some food-based attractions. One of those attractions is the Vivid Sydney Dinner, which will be taking place in the Ivy Ballroom. It's going to be a combination of light, music and food to encompass pretty much all the senses there. It's going to have a large variety of cuisines, and it's also going to have some well-esteemed chefs from all over the world. Another new thing that they're incorporating this year is the longest light walk that they have done yet, which will be 8.5 kilometres spanning from the Opera House to Central Station.
There was a fair bit of controversy at Vivid Festival last year when it ran during a national power supply crisis. At the time, the New South Wales Energy Minister Matt Keane defended it going ahead. Why did he give the green light?
So yeah, the event ran during a national power supply crisis, and there was a lot of government messaging about the time telling residents to stop or to take a look on their power consumption. The only thing is that the then New South Wales Energy Minister Matt Keane defended it. I think the reason why though is because Vivid focuses on sustainability and environmental responsibility, and in that year, actually 80% of their energy consumption was green accredited renewable energy.
So on to our next story. Australian author Marcus Zusak has knocked back Hollywood offers to take his book The Messenger to screens.
Ollie, Marcus Zuzak's other iconic book, The Book Thief, was made into a Hollywood blockbuster in 2013, so why did he reject the offers this time around?
So The Book Thief was a war drama set in Germany, World War II. I think that's the main distinction here, since The Messenger is set in Australia. Zuzak himself has said that The Messenger, the dialogue in it was very authentically Australian, so I think his aim is to replicate that and pay tribute to the book. Eventually, the Australian-based Lingo Pictures came along, which is a film company, and in conjunction with ABC, The Messenger has now been made into an ABC TV series. There were a lot of money offered by the offers that Hollywood gave Zuzak, but he rejected them ultimately to stay true to the story. The story itself follows a directionless 19-year-old who, after stopping a bank robbery, starts receiving some cryptic playing cards with directions that send him on a wild ride of different quests. Now we'll have a look at a short clip of the trailer for the TV series.
I'm getting messages from someone written on the Ace of Diamonds.
What messages?
Are you here to save us?
Where have you been? What the hell are you following me for?
Maybe I'm supposed to help you or something?
I need help.
You're dead man, Ed Kennedy.
Marcus Zuzak was the executive producer for the TV series. Did he have any disagreements with how the story has been adapted to big screen?
So I think he was pretty happy, actually. The scripts were really strong. There have been a few changes, such as one of the main characters, or one of the main side characters, have been changed to a female role. Another thing is the side characters have been given a lot more depth. So the story now, as a whole, is a lot more complex and has a lot more nuance to it. The changes that have been made to the script, though, have made the world feel a lot bigger and a lot more incorporative of modern-day Australia society. His role, though, as an executive producer was fairly minor. He said that his main contribution really was just writing the story itself. Moving forward, though, Zuzak has grown as a writer now, and he reflects that the book could have been a bit better, so he's much happier with how the TV show is being produced. Zuzak plans to release a memoir later this year sometime, so we'll be looking out for that.
Thank you, Ollie. And that's it for Roundup today.
We're heading into a short ad break now, but we'll be back with more stories and the latest in weather and sport. Stay with us.
Members of a scenic Victorian town are uniting to save a beloved tree. Amy Upton-Stokes has the details on the ongoing protests in Warburton.
A number of Warburton residents have come together to protect a large mountain grey gum tree. The Yarra Ranges Council had scheduled to remove the tree during the end of March because it was a risk to the public. However, community members have come together in protest to prevent it from being cut down. I spoke with community member Ravenna Culler, who has a strong connection to the tree.
I've built a personal relationship with this tree. I appreciate it every single time I pass it.
Miss Culler wants to save the tree because there are not many trees in the area that can support wildlife.
But they're not necessarily hollow-bearing and tall and able to support the range of bird life and who knows what else. My son found large tree frogs in this one year.
I also spoke with community member Kane Cashmore, who has been staying in the tree.
Well, climbed up there and we set up a platform up the top to sit up there and to protest and not let them cut it down.
Community members are disappointed with the lack of transparency with the Yarra Ranges Council.
There were no media announcements. There was no engagement with the community.
Can someone just
there was an A4 piece of paper on a stick stuck somewhere out on the grass.
Miss Keller believes that saving the tree will be a win for Warburton.
If we can retain as much of this tree as possible, it's a win for the wildlife. It's a win for the community who have a vision of what they want their township to be.
Whilst negotiations at this point are still ongoing, the future for the tree remains uncertain. I'm Amy Upton-Stokes reporting for RMIT Newsline.
Now, reporter Tess McCracken will be speaking to RMIT professor and renowned scholar in international student wellbeing, Catherine Gomez, on Australia's new migration laws coming into effect July 1st.
Thanks, Zoe. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today. International students on a student visa now need to attend face-to-face classes on campus, and their working hours will be capped to just 48 hours a fortnight. Catherine, rental vacancy rates are extremely low across Melbourne. What sort of pressure is rental competition going to put on students?
Oh, hi Tess, thanks for having me and thank you for your interest in international students. Gosh, where do I begin? Rental stress is difficult, and I've been hearing a lot of stories, and of course, you yourself and your listeners be, reading in the media about how international students have been sharing apartments. Like, you've got 6 people to a 2-bedroom because of that rental stress. But at the same time, I like to be also quite clear that these things have been happening even before COVID, where international students have been flat sharing, where you've got sort of like, too many people in one place, because Melbourne is a very expensive city. And the problem lies in the fact that sometimes, international students come without realizing that the cost of living is quite dear. I mean, I was an international student before, and I worked 3 jobs at any one time in order to put myself through university as well. So yeah, this is a certain kind of underclass that's going on at the moment.
Now, the federal government is suggesting a cap on working hours will decrease rates of workplace exploitation. But is there a concern students might start to engage in unregulated work to make ends meet?
That's already going on, and that's through the gig economy. So, think about, whenever you look outside your window, you see, or whenever you order anything from one of the food delivery platforms, chances are the person delivering your food is an international student. I've seen YouTube videos of international students actually recounting how they go about their day, and some of these students are working 12-hour days in the gig economy, as food delivery riders. So, for me, what what's always is a concern is that at the end of the day, an international student, comes to Australia or goes anywhere in order to better themselves in terms of an education. And the decrease, well, for me, the decrease in hours is I'm struggling to talk about this because to me, I've got two minds about this. That yes, decrease in hours means that students might find it very difficult in order to find legal paid work. But at the same time, an international student comes to Australia in order to gain an education, and their education is for a better life, better employment later on. Gig economy jobs will not help with that. I interviewed a student once who was telling me that she was failing her courses because she was working 27 hours and, sort of like a week, which she should not be doing. So at the end of the day, it's that, it's trying to actually decide, what's better, short term or long term. And I doing, and at the end of the day as well, it's also sort of like understanding where international students are coming from. And for them, many of them are coming from families where sometimes both parents work very hard in order to put their kids through university. So it's...
Catherine, we're running out of time. Sorry to cut you off, but thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate that.
It's time for sport and weather now. Reporter Shay Parisi joins us with the details.
It was a tipster's nightmare over the weekend in the AFL. Adelaide rounded off a weekend of upsets with a 17-point home game win over Brisbane last night. The result sees the Crows return to the top 8, while the Lions hold their position in third. Tanasi Kokonakis has upset British 20th seed Dan Evans in straight sets at the first round of the French Open overnight. Kokonakis headlined a strong opening night for the Aussies, with Jason Kubler also progressing in the men's draw and Storm Hunter victorious on the women's side. And Leicester and Leeds have joined Southampton, being relegated from the Premier League after Everton's victory in the season's final match day. The 1-0 win over Bournemouth means Leicester and Leeds are championship bound for the 2023-24 season. This has been the Newsline Sports Report, and now to the weather. To tomorrow's forecast for Australia's capital cities, it's going to be sunny in Sydney with a minimum of 9 before rising to a top of 21. It'll be cloudy in Canberra, very cool in the morning with a low of 3 and a max of 15 throughout the day. Also sunny in Sydney, in Brisbane, with no chance of rain, a low of 8 and a top of 23. Now to Perth, expecting a late shower or two and a minimum of 13, rising up to 24. In Darwin, it will be sunny, a low of 18 and top of 30. To Adelaide now, with a high chance of rain, a minimum of 13 and a maximum of 18. And Hobart has a very high chance of rain, most likely in the evening, a low of 7 and a top of 17. Back in Melbourne, looking to the week ahead, Tuesday, a low chance of rain before likely showers on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday and Saturday, we'll see a chance of rain before a clearer Sunday. Expect some mild temperatures this week. On Tuesday, a top of 18, followed by a top of 19 on Wednesday. Then just a little bit cooler on Thursday with a max of 16. That's all for weather. I'm Shay Parisi. Back to you, Ethan and Zoe.
That's our show for today. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsline. I'm Ethan Benedicto.
And I'm Zoe de Koning. Have a great night, Melbourne.